Hello, good afternoon and welcome to NRAS Facebook Live. I'm delighted to be joined here today by my colleague Elsa Bosworth. Whoa, I can't even speak today. Elsa Bosworth, our National Patient Champion, and Iain McInnes, who is our Scottish patron. And I, of course, am Claire Jacklin, CEO of NRAS. You're very welcome. We've had a huge amount of questions already submitted for this Facebook Live discussion on where we are with COVID, vaccines, rheumatoid arthritis, and many other elements. So I'm not going to deliberate much longer. I'm going to crack straight on and say welcome, Professor Iain McInnes, all the way from up in wee bonny Scotland, which I hope the sun is shining up there for you today, as it is down here. Thank you for taking your time this afternoon to join us. I know how incredibly busy you are, so we really do appreciate your time. So, as I said, we have quite a lot to get through. So I first wanted to start with questions everybody's asking, of course, is how safe, as someone with rheumatoid arthritis, are people getting the vaccine? I think we've reiterated it many times, but I think to have some reassurance from yourself about how safe are the vaccines for people with rheumatoid arthritis?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me along today. I'm wearing a t-shirt. It's a kind of celebration of summer up here in Scotland. We've had 3 days of summer already, and we expect it to stop tomorrow. So a 4-day summer on our account up here is actually pretty good going. So it's quite warm out there. So you know, if I start to fall over and expire, go easy on me. We're not used to this temperature above 10 degrees at this time of the year. So look, that's the most important question of the day, isn't it? Well, let's just think in general about vaccines and rheumatoid arthritis and the safety of vaccines and rheumatoid arthritis, and then the very focal issue around COVID-19 and whether you are or are not safe in the context of the COVID vaccine program. I think the first thing to say is that vaccines in general are a good idea for people with rheumatoid arthritis. Let's start at the very beginning. What's a vaccine for? A vaccine is designed to reduce the likelihood of we becoming infected with whichever infectious agent that vaccine is designed to combat. And you know, history is littered with success in this area. I mean, think of the smallpox vaccine, which has eradicated a disease, which is just incredible. Now, I'm not sure that we're going to be talking about eradication of diseases anytime soon, just to manage expectation. But we have a whole range of vaccines that we actually routinely recommend for use in people with rheumatoid arthritis. Pneumovax, annual influenza vaccine, the list goes on. And in fact, we have a lot of experience of the use of those vaccines in people with rheumatoid arthritis. And the overwhelming evidence is that they are safe and reasonable to use. Now, an analogy I quite like to use is that most people will get in the car as a driver or a passenger, and they will consider that it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do to get in the car to drive somewhere. That, of course, does not mean that every time you get in a car it's perfectly safe. Just every now and then you'll be in a road accident, and God forbid, very rarely, something quite serious might happen. And so the flip side of the argument is that occasionally vaccines will cause problems. And either the vaccine itself will cause a problem, there'll be an allergic reaction to the vaccine, or possibly the vaccine will trigger something else. It will trigger someone's arthritis, and it'll cause a flare of the arthritis. Now, I used an interesting word there. I said cause a flare. Actually, the truth is it may be associated with a flare. And I'm using my language very, very carefully there, because causing is when, so for example, a new black Labrador puppy has arrived in the McInnes household, much to the consternation of the older black Labrador McInnes who already lives here. Now, if I could show you, you maybe can't quite see it, but my forearm is covered in cuts and bruises because said new Labrador addition to McInnes household turns out to be the first black Labrador in history who prefers eating humans to anything else, and spent most of the morning trying to eat my arm, which was embarrassing because I was on a call to the MRC at the time. Anyway, in general, having a black Labrador is a very good thing. But when Toby, delightful wee fellow that is, bit me, there was a causal relationship between the puppy, the teeth, and the now rapidly healing wound in the arm. That's causal. Associated might be that somebody noticed that there was a puppy in the McInnes house, and I was walking down the street later on that day and said, "Oh, I see you've got a cut in your arm. Did that puppy bite you?" Now, the answer might be, yes, he jolly well did, and he's gone off to the glue factory soon. Or, well, actually, no, I was cutting the hedge, and that's why I've got a cut in my arm, but it's possible that maybe the puppy could have caused the problem. Why am I labouring the point? Because what you're hearing a lot at the moment is people saying, the vaccine caused this, the vaccine caused that. Well, at the moment, I think we're at a stage of saying the vaccine is associated with the occurrence of something. So that's the general world of vaccines. Now let's get specific. COVID-19 vaccines. What do we know about them? Well, first of all, they're new. They're actually a miracle of modern molecular medicine. Remember that this time last year, most of them were in trial phase. In fact, some of them didn't even exist. Remember that it normally takes 5 years or so for vaccines to be developed. And in fact, modern molecular medicine made these things in 5 or 6 months. And it's a very Scottish thing, half empty, half full glass of milk, or whatever else you like having in the morning. Well, I'm very much a glass is half full in my view of this. And the vaccines were developed quickly, but they were developed very carefully and very cleverly. And they've been tested in as many people as would normally be used for vaccine testing. And in fact, now are being given to literally millions and millions and millions of people very quickly. And the safety profile for the general population of the COVID-19 vaccines is highly satisfactory. And back to the traveling by car analogy, if you're thinking about whether to get in a car or not, most of the time, most people do. If you're thinking about whether you should have a COVID-19 vaccine or not, the risks to you of a serious event occurring in getting COVID-19 infection is far greater to you overall than the risk of taking a vaccine. So at the moment, for me, it's relatively straightforward. You're far better going for the vaccine than not. And there's no evidence at the moment, and I would refer you to the most up-to-date data here, which comes from the COVID-19 registry that we set up in EULAR. And I speak here with I'm now the ex-president of EULAR, much to my wife's delight. As of 2 weeks ago, I stepped back from my EULAR presidency to become the past president. But one of the things I guess I'm most proud of my EULAR presidency, which was an unusual experience, cancelling congresses and running the whole thing from my study here in Glasgow rather than going to meetings, was the COVID registry. So we've looked at now several thousand people with immune-mediated rheumatic diseases, and we're not seeing a serious signal here. Yes, there have been a small number of people who had serious adverse events, just as there have been in the general population, but we're not quite there to be able to say absolutely no difference. But at the moment, the data look encouraging. There are a small number of people who are developing an association with a flare of their arthritis. And that, I think, is exactly what we've seen with other vaccines. So the safety from the largest database we've got so far, the EULAR database, looks entirely satisfactory. The safety of vaccines in general outweighs the risks. I cannot guarantee that you will not have an adverse reaction, because I would be dishonest if I did. But overall, the risk to you, if you're getting up today with rheumatoid arthritis, is greater unvaccinated than vaccinated, of a poor outcome for your life for the rest of this third wave and, God forbid, subsequent waves of the virus. I hope that helps, Claire.
Indeed it does, and there's a lot of chat going on. I'm keeping a sort of half an eye on the chat on the Facebook, and quite a lot of people are saying, you know, they've taken, either done home antibody tests after the vaccine or have taken part, and I just some explanation about, it's not all just about antibodies, is it? About how the level of protection.
You know, it's funny, and I think we'll probably get to this later in our conversation about what we're going to do next. You know, let me just think out loud with you about these antibody tests. So first of all, what does an antibody test tell you? Well, an antibody test tells you about an amount of an antibody protein that is in your blood the day you got the test. That's all it tells you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't tell you whether you've got enough antibody, and the current commercially available tests do not tell you very much about the type of antibody you've got. Is it a good antibody, or is it just one that happened to be along for the ride? You know, we've all been to a dinner party where there's some really interesting people at dinner, and there's some folk who are, well, they ate the food, they maybe had a glass of wine or had a nice coffee. They weren't terribly interesting, and yeah, but they were there. So some of the antibodies that are made when you have a vaccine are very, very useful. We call those neutralizing antibodies. So they are antibodies that will prevent the virus doing its thing. But there are some other antibodies that are made that are a bit less interesting. So at the moment, the antibodies that are made that are and then measured by these tests don't necessarily tell you how active your level of protection is. And at the moment, there is no agreed level of antibody that tells you, I'm okay, nothing to worry about.
Right.
What we do, though, know at the population level is, and there's some data just in the last couple of days online, on average, the higher your antibody level, the more likely you are to be protected. But that doesn't tell you, if your name is Mrs. Smith and you live in Maidenhead, just thought of somewhere else, but Glasgow, Edinburgh, heavens, if you ever go to Edinburgh, it doesn't really translate to the individual level. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. So folk are looking at tests and saying, what does that mean for me? And the answer at the moment is that I don't really know what that antibody level means for a protection. And then in your question, Claire, there's an additional subtlety, which is antibody the only thing that happens in the immune system? Absolutely not. The immune system, in another life, I've studied the immune system for now, I'm getting old, 30 years. And the immune system is a fascinating, beautiful, wondrous, complicated thing. It's very, very complex. There are, literally billions of white blood cells that have to talk to each other. Many different types of proteins are made by those many different types of cells that have to work together. And to keep things simple, we do tend to think of the immune system in two parts: the antibody part and the white blood cell part, and the particular white blood cell that people have read about. So don't worry, there's not an immunology lecture coming, but quite a lot of people are reading now, and you hear people talk about a T cell. So forgive me using an immunological term, but it's out there in the BBC and it's out there in the news. So let me explain. The T cell is the kind of master regulatory cell. It's the part of the immune system that says, do or do not respond. And we are able now to measure the vaccine effect on the T cell, the regulatory bit, the switch on, switch off bit, and also the antibody level. Another way of thinking about this, I'm not massively fond of military analogies, but it works here. The antibodies are like the guys out there in the trenches, the guys out there doing the fighting. The T cell is a bit like the officer sitting back from the front line, looking at all the reports, thinking about, right, where am I going to send this group? Where am I going to send that group? And so we now know that your T cell response is at least as important as the antibody level, but that's not measured. And
exactly,
there are early.
Bring that up. That's an excellent.
No, carry on, Claire.
Lots of people are commenting that this has been incredibly helpful, because sometimes it can be a bit blinding with science. And Elsa and I were talking earlier just about the different terms, immunocompromised, immunosuppressed, immunomodulated, and they're bandied around. And I think there's some confusion as to which category of those do people with RA fall into. And so in very simple terms, is there a difference? Are we talking about the same thing when we talk about immunocompromised, immunosuppressed, immunomodulated? And then I'm going to hand over to Elsa then for the next question.
If this was a medical or an immunology conference, we could spend all afternoon worrying about this. But let me cut through all the nonsense and make this dead simple for you. Either your immune system is working normally and well, or it is not working as well as it should be. It is as simple as that. And if someone's immune system is not working as well, they might be called immunosuppressed, they might be called immunocompromised. Those two terms pretty much mean the same thing. Immunomodulated is interesting because a modulation, if you think of it, that's like a thermostat in the wall. You can turn the heat up or you can turn the heat down. So modulating the immune system does mean something slightly different. So to treat cancer, we switch the immune system on. That's the immune therapies you're reading about in cancer. To treat arthritis, we switch the immune system down a little bit. We turn the thermostat down a bit. We'll come back to that in your later questions, I suspect, because that's very important for how the vaccine will work. So immune modulated means have we switched the immune system up or down? That's the thermostat. But immune compromised, immune suppressed, don't worry about the detail. That just means that your immune system is not working quite as well as it should be. However, the good Lord gave us a very, very smart immune system. It's like an onion layer, or like the old fortresses. Let's stick with military analogies. The old castles in the olden days had many different walls. There was the outer wall, the inner wall, and then the special wall, and the king sat inside or the queen sat inside. And so the immune system has many layers of protection built in. And so even if one part of the immune system is not working as well as it should be, other parts of the immune system have an amazing ability to kick in. As I often say to people, biology is beautiful. It is the greatest story you ever read about. So I think in terms of the real world, why might someone with rheumatoid? So let's develop the question that some people in the Facebook call at the moment might be saying, okay, right, this guy, so now he's told me my immune system might not be working as well. Why? And if you've got rheumatoid arthritis, there are two reasons why your immune system might not be quite top notch. First reason is that your actual having rheumatoid means your immune system is slightly out of kilter. The immune system is causing damage in the joints. It's causing your fatigue. It's causing the feeling of weakness. Some of the immune proteins give the feeling of depression and anxiety that is such an important part of the disease. And so at one level, your immune system, think of it as being almost diverted. We've all had that experience where our mind is on something else, and even a simple task we don't do very well. I don't know if any of you have done this, but I've put cold water into a cup of tea because I was thinking about so many things. I've forgotten I hadn't actually boiled the kettle. Just telling it how it is. But all my patients, if any of them, poor souls, are listening, they're busy saying, right, I need a new doctor very quickly, makes cold cups of tea. So the thing, of course, is that I was distracted. And so the immune system, if it's very busy dealing with the joints, may become a little distracted. The second reason someone with rheumatoid arthritis might have a lower than normal response is because of the medicines we use. And this is where life's going to get quite interesting, because not all medicines are made equal. Some have a pretty significant effect on your immune system. Others are a much subtler, milder effect. And I think it's almost certain that different immune therapies will have differential effects on how effective vaccines are. And that may be something we can come to later, Claire or Ailsa, if you wish. But that's where it becomes quite important for us to know what you're on, and when you last took your medicine, and when we're thinking about giving the vaccine. And at the moment, we've got sensible guesses as to how we should do that. And very soon we'll have data, we'll have trials that will give us the right answer.
You've just said the magic.
You're explaining things so beautifully, Iain. Over to Ailsa.
Yes, I mean, I've always admired Iain's ability to explain incredibly complex science in a way that we can all understand. So let's hope that we can continue in that vein, Iain.
No pressure, Ailsa. I'm feeling anxious already.
Iain, you're involved, well, you're not involved, you're the lead investigator in the Octave study, which I'm sure some of the people watching today will have heard about because it's been in the national press. And I'd be grateful if you could tell everybody a bit more about that. I appreciate that we haven't got all the answers yet, and there may be things you can't tell us about at the moment, but it will be really good to know, because one of the things that I'm concerned about as being somebody who was shielding for all that length of time, and I know that even although I've had both my jabs, I won't be as protected as someone like Claire, for example. So how much can I get back out into society? How much do I need to continue to keep my guard up and be safe effectively?
Yeah, I know, absolutely, Ailsa. So two different questions really there. One was, what is the Octave trial? And two, how is it going to help us to give you and many people like you reassurance that it's ready? Yeah, it's time to go. The green light is on. Let's get back full on to life. Well, let me quickly tell you about Octave. It's a clinical study, as the name would infer. It's one of a small number of national trials that are being run under the auspices of either the MRC or the Vaccine Task Force, in turn acting on behalf of Professor Chris Whitty and Professor Jonathan Van Tam and the UK government. I should declare that I'm the chief investigator of the Octave study, but it's an incredible team effort, and there are other doctors and professionals who have done an amazing job in making it happen incredibly quickly. It's asking the following question. If I have a disease that in theory could make me vulnerable to COVID infection, how well do I respond to the vaccine? Because if my disease makes me more vulnerable to the vaccine not being as effective, it's your question, isn't it? I've had 2 shots of whatever vaccine it is, probably doesn't matter what one at the moment. Am I protected? So that's the question Octave's asking. And what we've done is we've recruited people with rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, a condition called vasculitis, which is where, again, the immune system attacks the blood vessels, and people quite often have problems with, for example, kidneys or skin and other organs. But we're also recruiting people with inflammatory bowel disease. You maybe heard of a condition called Crohn's disease, inflammation of the bowel. People with cancer, both solid cancers, but also leukemias. And people with long-term kidney disease on dialysis or maybe having had a transplant, and people with long-term liver disease, same proviso. So we're looking at a whole range of diseases where people are either their immune system is damaged or less competent because of the disease they've got, exactly as I've just discussed, Claire, in answer to your question, or who are taking medicines that might mean the vaccine is less effective. And what we've done is we've taken blood samples before the vaccines were given and afterwards, and then before the boosters were given and afterwards. And we've now got well above 2,000 people in the study. It's a big trial. I'm afraid we're just not quite ready to tell you the answer. We're very, very close. That there are now data flying around the place. We're cleaning the data up. We're sending them back to be double and triple checked. We'll be talking to the government in the next few days about the results, and then we'll be talking to people, the really important people, that's you, as soon after that as we can. It's not going to take very long. I hope you'll forgive me. I'd rather tell you the right answer rather than a quick answer that I then have to come back in a couple of weeks and say, remember I said that? Well, actually what I meant was this. And it will probably be roughly the same message, but I'd rather tell you what we're talking about. But the important thing to know is that very, very soon we'll be beginning to understand what the impact of these different diseases and the medicines are. We have some hints. So not the Octave trial. So just to be clear, not Octave, but there was one study that was shown as a late-breaking study at the EULAR meeting a couple of weeks ago. So this is pretty hot off the press, which came from an Israeli group led by Professor El-Kayam, and Ori actually is part of the EULAR Vaccine Task Force. She's absolutely fabulous. And they looked at several hundred people with a whole range of immune rheumatic disorders. And by and large, most people were doing okay. There were some subgroups of folk who seemed to be in trouble. Early days in small numbers, but people with rituximab treatment, for example, were potentially not doing as well as we'd have liked. A drug called mycophenolate And of course, the ever-present steroids. You know, if you're on a steroid, that seems to mess up just about everything in life, doesn't it? So those were drugs that just got an early, let's be careful signal. And as I say, it's early days. We'll be talking about the Octave data in the next few short number of weeks. And there are other data from the United States coming through that we're expecting to be able to talk about publicly very soon as well. My gestalt in all of this is that the majority of people will probably be okay. That's been our experience with other vaccines. And there will be a minority of people, really important people, by the way, in whom the vaccine response isn't as strong as we'd like it to be. And then before you ask me, Ailsa, okay, back to the blood test question. How will I know? Because you'll say, right, do I do a blood test? And what will that tell me? And I'll answer you. Completely unsatisfactory answer is, well, it's where I started. We don't really know what a blood level means. What I would say is if the blood level is 0, then we've got a problem. You know, the old movie, Houston, we've got a problem. What we're going to do for those folk is straight away we're going to be boosting. I think where it becomes a bit subtler is, well, my antibody level was such and such, and I was down talking to my friend on the phone yesterday, and she got her test done, and her antibody level was something higher than my antibody level, and she doesn't have rheumatoid arthritis. So does that mean I'm in trouble? And the answer is it's too soon to know, because we've got lots of different bits of the immune system protecting us, and we don't really know what level of an antibody is necessary. Yeah. And of course, there's another subtlety in here, which is that you've all heard about these variants of concern now. You know, we used to talk about the football or the price of fish, and now we talk about the latest variant of concern. Well, maybe, but actually I have to tell you, we don't talk about football in Scotland just for the avoidance of doubt, because it's just too embarrassing after the somewhat pathetic efforts on the part of our so-called heroes. You know, they did their best. We're very proud of them. But so good luck to the 3 lions who are still holding up the British end. Good luck. We're all shouting for you. But the truth is that I'm actually worried that sometimes these tests are causing more anxiety than they're alleviating. And
that's
it's not
that feeling, Iain, is that, you know, people are getting, they want to know, quite rightly. Lots of people, again, reading a few of the comments coming in, how will we know? And the thing is, it is just too soon. But one thing I would say to we've got 127 people watching us at the moment. So to all of you out there, thank you for joining us this afternoon. But the best way to keep informed is by linking with organisations like ourselves. So do sign up for the e-news bulletin. As soon as we know from people like Iain, we will be telling you. Yep. Make sure that you're getting the information from valid evidence-based sources, because there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. So, you know, as Iain was just saying, you know, just because you've spoken to your next door neighbour and they've got a different sort of result, it's very complex. So do please make sure that you're keeping up to date with our e-news bulletins. Got so many questions to get through, so I'm going to crack on a little bit if you don't mind. There's, I think we've answered quite a few of the questions that were put to us in the chat earlier, but there is quite an interesting one that's just popped up, and if I may just go back to it, it's not one I've heard of, but somebody is asking about encouraging research done by the kidney transplant doctors that seem to have discovered that, now this doesn't sound at all nice, that a tapeworm nasal spray could be used as a preventative for people with immune issues. Have you come across that? That's not something I'm familiar with.
That sounds horrible.
It does, but hey, if it works, I don't know. And somebody else has responded saying they've heard about that as well. So I don't know much about that.
Yeah, I'll be quick here, because I think there's probably other questions that will be quicker to market, if I can put it that way. But actually, to the asker of the question, that's a great question. But let me, it's actually a brilliant story. Now, I don't know whether that's the answer or not, by the way. I don't know whether tapeworm or other parasite products are the answer. But let me explain why the conversation's happening. So And ironically, this is something that I was part of investigations more than a decade ago, led by the Harnett team in Glasgow, and indeed continued now in several other groups around the country. There's a very interesting phenomenon, which is that people can have parasites surviving in their body for months or even years. And you might ask the obvious question, why does the immune system not kill off the parasite? And the answer is because the parasite, over millions of years, has worked out that it can subtly alter the immune system. And these worms are smart. They want to make sure that you don't kill the worm, but they don't want to kill the human, because if you kill the human, the worm can't go anywhere. So the worms are really, really smart. So over millions of years, they've been thinking of ways of modifying the human immune system. And that's what these clever investigators are capitalizing on. They're looking at how can I use the way in which the parasite-human relationship forged over millions of years. How can I capitalize on that for modifying immune responses? Beyond that, it's going to get awfully complicated. And I must be honest, it's actually a great question. It's a fascinating question, but it wouldn't be the way I'd be going at the moment if I had rheumatoid arthritis to navigate this phase of the pandemic. But great question, yeah, well read.
And I think, you know, all these, you know, there is amazing research going on in all different disciplines, and people like Professor Chris Buckley and Kareem Raza, you know, of the ATAP work that they're doing is looking at all these different immune systems. So believe, you know, while we're not talking about that here today, there is a huge amount of research linking different disciplines together, and that do have, you know, commonality in things. So Elsa, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Okay, so I'm just going to change the subject for the moment.
Go for it.
Iain, you're obviously aware of the new EULAR recommendations on self-management that Eleanor and I led the EULAR task force on. So we've developed EULAR recommendations on self-management strategies in inflammatory arthritis, which have recently been published and presented at EULAR and now being translated into 6 languages. You've got them, fantastic, 10 out of 10.
They sit by my bedside every night, Ailsa. They're close to my heart. I sometimes just carry them with me, you know.
You are a star. What I really want to ask you, Iain, is we're now working with EULAR to get implementation of these strategies across Europe, because we're passionate about self-management being really embedded in the patient pathway for people with long-term conditions like rheumatoid. Would you like to comment on these and their importance in moving us towards a more holistic model of patient care?
I'd be delighted to do that. And let me just pick out different components of your question, because there's some very important strands that we should try and weave together. The first thing is, I think most people will be familiar with who EULAR is. It's the European Alliance of League. Used to be European League Against Rheumatism, but what's a league and what's rheumatism? Whoa, we'll get to the 21st century. So one of the things I was able to do as the president was actually change the name. So it is actually now a European Alliance, which I think is something we can all understand. And alliance is about partnership, and that's something that's very, very important for me. The second thing just to say about EULAR, it's 3 pillars, and at the very centre are patients. So patients, health professionals, and doctors. So all coming together to try and solve problems. This is a very important paper for us, Ailsa, because it actually uses the word implementation. And that's the first point I wanted to highlight, which is that this is actually a new phase of EULAR's existence, where not only are we making recommendations, or we used to call them points to consider, things to think about when you're looking after someone with rheumatoid arthritis or vasculitis or some other condition. What we're now actually moving on to is a phase of, well, we can write papers and we can talk at meetings until we're blue in the face, but if we don't actually do it, nothing's going to change for the people who've got these conditions. And so I'm really, really proud of this on behalf of EULAR. It's one of the most important papers that was published during my presidency, because it's talking about implementing, and then something else that actually is quite close to my heart, although I wasn't clever enough to qualify for this task force. I applied, but I failed the entry exam. Ailsa marked my script and said, well, we're not having this fella. I'm just kidding, just teasing Ailsa. What about self-management? Well, self-management is about where you are given back control of your life in the context of having a condition. And this starts for me as a physician. I very rarely use the word patient. I use it when it has a context, the patient pillar of EULAR. But for me, I look after people. I don't look after patients. I look after people who happen to have a medical condition, and it impacts, in the case of rheumatoid, ferociously on quality of life and the relationships that people have with their families, with their friends, with their professional associations in their workplace and their hobbies and everything. You know that far, far better than I do. Of course you do. And a lot of what this is about building a partnership. It's building a partnership between the health professional, the doctor, the person with rheumatoid arthritis, and saying, in partnership, we go together, a collective. And that moves away from the very paternalistic medical model which permeated life. Certainly when I was a medical student, I was taught very much. Doctors assimilate information. You then have to think about what all that information means for your patient. And you then offer advice, and you then guide and drive and your responsibility. And I mean, nowadays that sounds quite dictatorial, but it was driven with compassion. It wasn't that doctors were bad people who wanted to control the universe. Doctors are just a sample of the human race. I'm quite sure there were some doctors who did want to do all of that. But now I think what this paper really is emblematic of a very different way of thinking about the health professional, doctor and patient relationship. It's about you, someone with rheumatoid arthritis, becoming a part of the decision-making process, and not a tokenistic part, but someone whose opinion actually will shape the direction of travel. Thank goodness, we now have options for the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. We have medical options, the prescription of medicines, but we also have empowerment. We have a whole lot of digital modalities now that are available to help people to move forward. And all of these, by the way, are captured in the and there's a lay summary for this document that I hope, I'm not sure if it's actually out yet, Eels, or if it's not, well, it should be coming pretty soon. We're trying to get the PDF out at the same time as the paper at the moment. So please do have a look at it. And this is about making decisions that are collectively acceptable. Because, you know, if I ask someone to take a medicine or to, taking medicines is actually quite specific, and adherence to a lot of our medicines is quite low, particularly methotrexate. Adherence to biological medicines is actually much higher because people tangibly feel the benefit of taking them. So, you know, if you're doing something and you feel better and you've had it explained to you properly, then by and large people will do a lot better on them. But let me give you an example of how partnership can work as opposed to dictatorial or paternalistic medicine. So I have two daughters. Neither of them, one has a very tidy bedroom. Megan's bedroom is a place of beauty. You could do surgery in there and there'd be no infectious risk. It's extraordinary. I have a second daughter. They're both wonderful, by the way, and neither will be listening to this, nor will they ever, whose bedroom can only be described as post-hurricane, whatever. I'll call it Hurricane Becky, not giving her name away or anything like that. And now, what am I going to do about that? Well, I could take the medical paternalistic model. Rebecca, please go and tidy your bedroom. Do you think that will make one blind bit of difference to the appearances of Rebecca's bedroom this evening? Absolutely no chance. I could, however, say, Becky, let's sit down together. The advantages to you in having a tidy bedroom are the following. Let's think about this together. What do you think about it? What are the problems in tidying your bedroom? And then all of a sudden it turns out, well, actually, Dad, I don't really understand where do I put all the stuff? There isn't enough room in the cupboards for all of this stuff. So the reason it's lying on the floor is, so I'm being a little simplistic, forgive me for that. But now let's become serious. If I ask someone with rheumatoid arthritis to do something as part of their care, which with the best will in the world, they're never going to be able to do, then that decision is doomed to failure. So, for example, I'd like you to take more exercise because that will help you to lose weight. How often have you been told that? Yeah, but hang on a minute. I can't actually take exercise. No, sorry. The decision was take exercise because there's evidence that that's a good decision. See you next month or next 6 months because of the way clinics are. Whereas the conversation could be, weight's probably a bit of a problem for us at the moment, isn't it? Yeah. Taking exercise, we both know, is really, really good for people with rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah. It's clearly been a challenge for you. Tell me all about the problems you're having in right, okay, so you can't actually get to a fitness club at the moment, or you've tried it and your joints became awful afterwards because there was a lot of post-exercise pain. All right, so what can we do about that? Let's maybe get the physios involved here because we might want to think about this as a team. And what's the point of telling you to go to an exercise club if you can't get there or you can't afford it? And you see how the conversation goes. It's a totally different conversation. And of course, the second conversation will lead to success. The first one will be a slightly embarrassed, short conversation saying, well, yeah, I tried it and it didn't work. Sure.
Yeah.
But whose fault is that? It's certainly not the person with rheumatoid. It's my fault as the doctor because I made a decision and didn't involve people in the decision who were going to be vital for implementing the decision. So I have a look at the paper. It's got loads of suggestions. And with people like you, Ailsa and Claire, and the wonderful NRAS behind it, let's get it into practice. Let's get this stuff out there and let's do it.
And we certainly will be engaging with patients as well in helping us to implement this, because all of you out there watching are key to this as well. I think it's about building those partnerships with your multidisciplinary team and buying into doing your bit, not just expecting the answers all to come from the healthcare professionals. That all links back beautifully to, all our self-management resources, etc. There's been lots of questions, which we won't be able to get to, about actual specific medications, not just linking with COVID, but just, people asking about hydroxychloroquine or whatever. If you're not familiar with us, we do have an excellent medicines booklet, which is free to download from our website, or you can order the hard copy here that has all that information about medicine. So we won't be covering that just now. But I kind of wanted to go back to, you hinted there a few moments ago about actually seeing people, and I just wanted to get a feel for how you and your colleagues are coping with this strange new world with a lot more virtual consultations, and what do you, from a healthcare professional's point of view and from a clinician's point of view, what are the pros and cons to virtual consultations? Because I think they're here to stay, but there will be a blended service, I think, going forward.
You're going to hear blended and hybrid a lot going forward in just about every sphere of life, aren't you? Well, first of all, if some of my rheumatology clinical colleagues will be falling about with hysterical laughter at McInnes knowing anything about busy clinics, I should say that not because I'm important, but because I become a sort of overpaid administrator in the world of academia. I spend, as a vice principal of a university, I spend quite a lot of time away from the clinic now. But when I occasionally get to the clinic, and obviously talking all the time to my much more admirable full-time clinical colleagues, we're all forming pretty clear views here. First of all, there are pros and cons. As Charles Dickens said, it was the worst of times, it was the best of times. It was the epoch of despair, it was the spring of hope, and Tale of Two Cities. And I've used that quotation quite often in thinking about the impact that COVID has had actually right across the whole discipline of how I treat people. But to your specific question about how our consultation is going to work, it's going to be a mixed model, isn't it? And it's going to depend, I think, on individual people with rheumatoid. There are some people for whom actually a teleconsultation is a pretty good idea. If you're doing well, you're feeling well, you are on a stable medicine that's agreeing with you, and you have a good GP who makes sure your blood pressure is okay and that you don't have other so-called comorbidities. That's the medical word for another condition that can either result as a cause of having rheumatoid arthritis or just another condition you happen to have that might interact with rheumatoid arthritis. So provided everything's stable, a quick teleconsultation is absolutely brilliant. That's grand. So that's a category of people for whom teleconsultations and maybe an annual checkup at the rheumatology clinic that's a great solution. And then there's another group of people whose disease isn't well controlled at all. And for them, the telephone might not be particularly useful, although it might be quite a good way of saying, I've got a problem. Can I be seen? And most good clinicians on a teleconsultation can work out pretty quickly when we've got a problem, and that'll be a prompt to say, right, let's get you in quickly and let's try and get things sorted out. And, you know, in these days, I mean, even now we're talking about the third wave, people are still understandably anxious about coming into a hospital environment because, you know, we all talk about social distancing, but there's more coronavirus in and around the hospital environment than pretty much anywhere else at the moment, apart from maybe football stadia. Only kidding. I don't know if the last thing I said is true or not. Certainly not Scottish football stadia, because they're all empty because we're not in the competition anymore. But so I think there's understandable anxieties about coming into hospital. I would say that coming into the green, clean corridors to outpatient departments is a perfectly acceptable and reasonable thing to do, and you shouldn't be afraid of coming to rheumatology clinics at the moment. I think that's a very important thing to say. The anxiety is justifiable, but don't let it put you off because, you know, untreated rheumatoid arthritis causing rapid damage to joints, causing complications to medicines that are not recognised, that turns my blood cold. That makes me really worried. So please don't be afraid to reach out to us. We are still here to treat and help and consult. So you know, the telephone shouldn't get between person with arthritis and good healthcare professional. It's not a barrier.
That links nicely there, and hopefully that answers somebody else's question. There's somebody who's due to go in for an operation soon, who is, you know, understandably worried about catching COVID in hospital. But I think, as you said, you know, that hospitals are probably now much safer because we're so familiar.
Completely different proposition. I mean, this time last year, through no fault of anyone's, by the way, this is not an attribution of blame remark, quite the contrary. Look, it was really, really difficult. We had repurposed pretty much the whole NHS to deal with a pandemic. Rheumatology clinics were it's interesting, different parts of the country did different things. In Glasgow, most of the rheumatologists are dual accredited. They do acute medicine and rheumatology. And the rheumatologists in Glasgow were just incredible. They went and did a lot of acute medicine to help deal with the pandemic. But Stefan Siebert and Neil Basu did an astonishing job in picking up a lot of the rheumatology care, and they were just amazing. And the same thing happened, I have to say, around the country. Now it's a totally different proposition. And you know, if you're in real pain, you're disabled, and an operation is necessary, then it should be a time to go and have that done. It's about balancing risk. Life just isn't risk-free. And we're beginning to hear the politicians talk about this. We're going to get to a phase, and we're at the beginning of that phase, folks. And I don't know, it's a bit like, when is the end of the pandemic and the beginning of new life? When are we at that point? And we're not really going to know. It's like another analogy I love. So some of you may know the Scottish beaches. We're way north up here, and the tide is enormous. You know, it can be 50 or 60 metres between low tide and high tide, even bigger in some of the very northern Scottish beaches. So where does Scotland end and the Atlantic Ocean start? Well, it depends what time of day it is, doesn't it? and it's only when you step back and look at a satellite view of Scotland that it's pretty obvious, because you don't really care about 100 metres or 200 metres. It's pretty obvious that there's Scotland and then there's the Atlantic. And the pandemic's going to be the same. In 10 years, we'll look back and say sometime in 2021, that was it. We kind of moved to a new phase where we kind of lived with coronavirus. I think we're getting closer and closer to that point. I'm a bit of an optimist. I think we'll be there in the third quarter of this year. We'll be in a phase where we're kind of having to accept that we're not, first of all, personal view, I don't think we'll eradicate this virus. I don't think that's going to be possible in the useful medical time frame. Secondly, I think we are going to have to accept a modicum of COVID-associated risk. because I think the mental health implications, and I'm talking now about people with rheumatoid arthritis, the mental health implications of shielding forever, that's a non-starter. The implications in not having enough exercise, getting out and about, the implications in missing loved ones, the implications in not participating in the workplace, the implications of all of those are profound and carry their own medical risks. And I think it's quite encouraging to hear some of the slightly more avant-garde politicians being a bit more honest and saying, we're going to come to a point, folks, where we vaccinate the wazoo out of everybody, we'll boost people, we'll have done everything we reasonably can, and it's time to get back out to sensible living. Now, I don't mean we're going to be loving and hugging and jumping up and down and, in the main street together, but sensible living will allow us to get a modicum of normality back. It'll be a slightly new normal. It might even be a better normal. It might be that sensible behaviours will mean that there's less influenza around, that we don't transmit other viruses as often. It might be that hybrid working, Claire, that you're alluding to, we actually have a telephone service that means there are more consultations face-to-face available for the people that really need them at that time. We might need a more honest conversation. What do I mean by that? A lot of what I do in a consult is listen to what isn't being said to me. That sounds a bit odd, doesn't it? I'm listening to what's not being said. What do you mean, McInnes? Quite often people say things, and what I'm listening to is, but you didn't say something else, did you? Yeah. Many years ago, I put a wee video together called I'm Fine or something like that. Some of you may remember it. It was unbelievably corny in retrospect, but do you know what? It was heartfelt. Mm-hmm. And how often have you, and I'm now looking at Facebook right into the camera, I'm looking at the people in this call, how often have you said, I'm fine, I'm okay? When what you actually meant was, I'm either not ready for the real conversation, or I love you too much to tell you where I'm really at right now, and you're my son or my daughter or my best friend or my husband or my wife. And it's just too hard to say, I'm actually really not fine, I'm crap today. Sorry, that was a wee Scottish word, wasn't a real word.
We can edit that out, Iain, that's fine.
Thank you, but you know what I mean. Indeed. And I think it's that bit, it's that being honest with ourselves in a COVID real world. We can't hide forever. So we will be doing a trial this summer and into the autumn to look at the effect of boosting people with rheumatoid arthritis. So that's not fully in the public domain yet, but it's no massive secret that we're going to be doing boosting studies. Cove Boost is already up and running, and there'll be others like that will be coming, I'm sure, very soon, to look at how well booster strategies work. Exactly. We're going to be doing a lot of work to think about, holding some medicines. Should we maybe pause methotrexate for a couple of weeks before you get your COVID vaccine? Should we maybe time the vaccine before your next rituximab infusion? It's common sense stuff, and at the moment, I think that's advice we would be giving anyway, based on experience from other vaccines. So I think and back to the Scottish tide, I think we're getting close to low tide now. I think we're at the time where we're going to say, that's it. We've got a big beach in front of us. Let's walk, because we know when the tide's going to come in again, and we can just walk a bit further up the beach, knowing when the tide comes. And you know what? You can walk. Beautiful
analogy. And
you know what I mean? Right, that's exactly what it is.
And I'd like you, Iain, I'm looking straight down the camera. Please, if you are able to take part in some of these studies, please do so, because it's only with all of you out there participating in these kind of studies that we'll get the answers that you're all asking us for. I'm just going to hand over, because I'm really conscious of time, and I know how incredibly busy you are. But Elsa, let's go back to the question we were going to ask earlier.
Iain, you will be aware that we've been working with the BSR for many years to try and get NICE to lower the eligibility criteria for advanced therapies. And we were absolutely, Claire and I were dancing around the office in June when we got the final draft guidance from NICE to say that they were going to allow 3 TNFs, and of course earlier in the year we had filgotinib passed for moderate, so we've got 4 drugs available to treat people with moderate disease at last. which is going to change the lives of thousands of people. But this is NICE guidance, which is applicable in England and Wales. The Scottish Medicines Consortium is the body, the regulatory body that admits new drugs in Scotland. What are your thoughts about whether we can, whether that's going to follow suit in Scotland?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the SMC's position in the last couple of weeks since the very welcome NICE guidance came out. So with my apologies, I won't speak specifically to where they've got to in deliberations. I think it's highly unlikely that they will stay different for too long. I think it would be very unusual. And I have to give credit to NHS Scotland and indeed to the SMC. Quite often they've been ahead of the curve in comparison to NICE. So if you think that's a diplomatic answer in times of IndyRef 2 conversation, then you're absolutely correct. That's exactly what it is. But and as I say, they may be about to announce or may have announced last week and I've missed it, which I don't think they have or would probably have heard about it. Yeah. But I'm sure that the needs of people with rheumatoid arthritis in Scotland equate very much to the needs of people in England and Wales with rheumatoid arthritis. And certainly I would have no hesitation in making that case as strongly as was necessary in whichever office it was necessary. And Claire and Ailes are smiling because they've seen me on that particular orange box before, and it's an orange box that I will happily occupy in times to come. But I'm sure that data and the good sense and the very goodwill, I have to say, of NHS Scotland will follow. It's a fine organisation and has generally worked in a very convivial way in this regard.
And just last week we saw the really informative report come out from the British Society for Rheumatology on workforce and the lack of so many clinician posts that need filling, specialist nurses, etc. And of course, while we welcome the NICE decision about having more access, that's going to be difficult on the back of COVID, on the back of this report showing that rheumatology services are stretched to right to the very limits at the moment. So I just wanted to sort of manage people's expectations about even when the NICE guidelines are finalised and that people with moderates can be assessed for access to these biologics and the filgotinib, which is a JAK inhibitor. It will still take time to filter through. I really don't want people banging down the door for rheumatology going, I'm a moderate, I want the next thing. It's not going to happen at speed. And that's because of everything else but it is a huge, huge achievement. And after 4 years of NRAS campaigning along with the BSR. But going back to the workforce issue, what are your views? I mean, how are we going to resolve this issue of just not enough clinicians, nurses, physios, etc. in rheumatology? Where is our magic wand?
Especially with more people coming up for retirement as well. Worrying from a patient perspective.
So first of all, I want to echo Claire's realism, managing expectations. So can I underline that? But seeing as we're almost at the end of our time together, let me just look over the horizon a little bit for you, because I think there's a lot of sunshine there. So let me say the following. First of all, present company accepted rheumatologists are by and large the nicest doctors in the place. There's a very good reason for that, because a lot of rheumatologists signed up for rheumatology before the advent of a whole class of drugs that transformed lives. So by and large, there was a characteristic in a rheumatologist that said, I'm actually in this for the long haul. I want to go the journey with people with chronic disease. And they're really special people. Rheumatologists are special people. I've always felt unbelievably privileged to be part of that community. The second thing is that rheumatology is one of the disciplines in modern medicine that has been an absolute hotbed of discovery, advance, understanding of disease and translation of that understanding into really incredible medicines. Thirdly, it's a discipline, because it's chronic, and because people with arthritis can be self-empowered, just bringing our whole conversation together, it's really lovely, because an empowered patient body with a hybrid working model for care, some of it automated, some of it digitized, some of it captured through wearables. That's, your smart watch. I can't mention the brand, but you know there are now brands that will measure your heart rate and your oxygen level and all that kind of stuff, your number of steps. All of that, the next phase of medicine delivered in a digitally informed age, rheumatology is very well placed to benefit from a lot of that. And finally, we need to get to work in medical schools. We need to get to work in nursing colleges. We need to get to work amongst young nurses, doctors, physios, health professionals, and evangelize, and that's almost what it's going to have to be, on what an extraordinarily brilliant discipline it is, what incredible unmet need remains. And that's where I'm at risk of sounding patronizing. But looking after people with rheumatoid arthritis, I look after people with rheumatoid and psoriatic arthritis mainly in my discipline. That's been my specialty for 25 years. It's been the biggest privilege of my life. I'm in awe of people who live with these chronic conditions. And the fact that I'm actually allowed to try and do something about it is breathtaking, frankly. And I think it's transmitting that passion to the next generation. And I'm pretty confident, I really am. It remains one of the most exciting disciplines in modern medicine, and I'm confident that that will transmit itself in. But of course, it needs the political wherewithal, which is why the BSR's report is so welcome. It needs the patient voice, which is why NRAS and other eminent patient organisations in the UK, and by the way, beyond, it's not a British problem. I can tell you with my EULAR hat on that this is something we're worrying about right across Europe. It's not even a rheumatology only problem. So, but listen, I'm an optimist. People with rheumatic diseases are incredible, and rheumatology is one of the most fulfilling disciplines to be a professional healthcare practitioner, nurse, doctor, physio, doesn't matter which. And I'm really confident that the next stage of digital integrated hybrid medicine will see rheumatology flourishing. So let's be optimistic.
Well, that's a lovely note to end on. I just want to say, I'm reading somebody's comment here saying, I so wish that he was my doctor.
Oh, you really don't, trust me.
We won't give your address out so that people won't come knocking on your door. It's been, as I said, I echo what Elsa said earlier, that you have a gift of making the very complex accessible for people like me. That I got a D in biology. I will admit it here and now. My children will laugh at me because I changed it to a B on the certificate, but that's another thing. I've put it out there now. I'm really rubbish at science, but it is a great privilege. And I echo what Iain has said here just now, that I am always in awe of so many of you out there living with rheumatoid arthritis. It's an absolute sod of a disease. And it really is so humbling to work at NRAS and be able to do our little bit to make your lives hopefully a lot better. There's so much more we could have gone through. We've ran out of time. We will have Iain back in the future with hopefully more information about the Octave study when there's more to tell you. I will please, if you're not already signed up to our e-news bulletin, or better still, if you're not a member of NRAS, please do think about joining, because that's the best way to keep informed. It's a great way of keeping you networked and informed of opportunities to take part in studies as well. And I will just finish by saying thank you so much, Elsa, for joining me on this call. Thank you so much, Professor Iain McInnes from up in Scotland, after I know what has been an awful day. I hope things improve with that carnivorous dog that you have, your puppy. I hope you get some training there for him. And I just want to finish on what is now becoming my mantra about coming out of COVID. We're not going back to normal. We're going forward to better. And together, as partners with our healthcare professionals, with our patient population, and with organisations like ourselves and the BSR, we will come out of this stronger and better, and with an improved rheumatology service for all. So thank you so much to the over 100 people that have joined in. Great conversation, lovely comments. I'm so sorry we couldn't answer each and every one of your questions, but we will be back hopefully in a month's time with another Facebook Live. There are Zoom events as well, so do please look on our website, get in touch, and we're here to help every step of the way. Thank you so much. I'll let you get back to your evening and be munched on by a naughty black. God bless and take care and stay safe. Thank you, Elsa. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.